that right? Boris Johnson and the peelers. Is it a fair cop gov? For reasons best known to our rulers, Europe stands on the brink of war over a faraway country of which we know even less than the last faraway country that plunged the world into war. What's really going on there? Plus, is the Bible hate speech? All that, and the only part of the show that really matters, your questions and comments. Let me know what's on your mind by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweeting us at gbnews. That's all coming up after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Thank you, Mark. The top story this hour, the Prime Minister has warned if Russia invades Ukraine, the bloodshed will be comparable to the first war in Chechnya or Bosnia. Russia has amassed around 100,000 troops on its border with Ukraine, raising fears of an imminent attack. Boris Johnson told MPs the British Army will protect its allies and will look to contribute to any new NATO deployments. He also says sanctions against Moscow would be severe, inflicting pain on the Russian economy.
Any attack on his neighbour would be followed by tougher sanctions against Russia, further steps to help Ukraine defend herself, and by an increased NATO presence to protect our allies on NATO's eastern flank.
Boris Johnson. Well, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the UK must show Russia that any further aggression will result in severe real-world consequences.
That is why it is crucial that we in this House are united in opposing Russian aggression.
Sir Keir Starmer. Well, in other news, Boris Johnson says he welcomes the Metropolitan Police investigation into alleged parties at Downing Street during lockdown. Met Police Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick has confirmed a number of events are being looked at by officers. Number 10 says talks between Sue Gray's inquiry team and the Met would determine what could be published from her report. Former Detective Chief Inspector at Scotland Yard Mick Neville told GB News the police couldn't ignore it any longer.
It was the government who chose to criminalise what would otherwise be ordinary family events, and people have put up with all sorts of sacrifices. And so the police now have to take this action.
In other news, France says it could start legal proceedings against the UK if more licences are not granted, allowing French trawlers to fish in UK and Channel Islands waters. Currently, 93% of requested licences have been issued by Britain, compared to 60% in November. However, the French government says it wants a further 73 licences signed off. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, says she believes there is a deal to be done to resolve the deadlock. In Yorkshire, following the death of Star Hobson, children's social care services at Bradford Council are to be put in the hands of a separate trust. The council had contact with the family of the 16-month-old who was murdered by her mother's girlfriend in 2020 after months of cruelty and neglect. The council will own the not-for-profit trust, but it will operate at arm's length under the control of a new independent chair and a board of directors. And Sir Elton John has tested positive for COVID-19 and it looks like we'll have to reschedule some of his shows in the United States. On Instagram, the 74-year-old musician expressed his disappointment to postpone his show in Dallas, Texas. He says that his symptoms are mild and he fully expects to be back on the road this weekend. On TV, online and on your radio through DAB+. You're with GB News. Now more from Mark Steyn.
Once more, unto the breach of lockdown regulations, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our mouldy birthday cake. As I've said before, all the COVID fines should be reimbursed. There was never a scientific basis or a public order basis for preventing freeborn peoples from gambling and frolicking outdoors or for seeing their friends and family. Give back the fine money, you status control freaks. And yet, nevertheless, with respect to the Boris Johnsonian angle, I dislike this story. because the story is what it is. It's been plotted out very carefully with nightly cliffhangers and each dawn bringing a new chapter with a stunning twist. Oh, illegal birthday cake with his interior designer. No, wait, it's now a criminal investigation. I would be interested to know who's drafted this well-oiled machine of a slick narrative. Presumably they all get together for the 007 Spectre board meeting in a hollowed-out volcano every night and agree on the following morning's Telegraph front page or ITV scoop. If they pull it off, it would be good to know who, quote-unquote, they are, because although he is a large and inviting target, it's unlikely to stop at the current Prime Minister. How do we know it's being plotted out like an old-time radio serial? Well, earlier this month, when Partygate broke, I gave a roundup off the top of my head of other political leaders around the world who'd been caught out. The governor of lockdown California whooping it up maskless at a fancy French restaurant. The premier of Alberta boozing it up at a Downing Street-style party when his downtrodden subjects couldn't. At a time when picnicking was banned in Ireland, the topless Taoiseach Leo Varadkar was besporting himself with similarly underdressed hunks around a big picnic hamper in Phoenix Park. There's the telltale picnic hamper at bottom right in that photograph. But that photograph was taken when they were actually in the park, and the guy who took it leaked it immediately. So the difference between all these cases and that of Mr. Johnson is that all these lockdown breaches were exposed in real time, within hours, on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, by some citizen who happened to be within photo range and snapped away. So by the time the hapless politician got home from the park or from the restaurant, he was all over the internet, he did his mea culpa, and he moved on. This is not like any of the other cases. These aren't picnics and parties from the last 24 hours. These are events from a year and a half ago that political insiders have sat on until they could be released in a particular order to do maximum damage. In that sense, it's closer to the deep state machinations against Trump, the phony baloney Russia investigation and all the rest of it. Now, as I've said before, it's kind of night. But as I've said before, like almost everyone who's had anything to do with him these last 30 years, I have a deep personal antipathy toward Boris Johnson. Beyond that, he's not at all to my taste politically. The awful green fanaticism, the high taxes, the gutless, contemptible cowardice in the face of all the wokery. But he got Brexit done after 3 years of dithering from Lady May and 3 years of subversion of the will of the people by every organ of British power. The next PM will peddle all the same ghastly green hooey and the confiscatory taxation and the woke suck-uppery, but will he still have Brexit? Ladies and gentlemen, making the point that a man who will lie about his birthday cake will lie about backstops and trade deals, here is Michael Heseltine saying, as the young uns put it, the quiet bit out loud.
But on the bigger issue of Brexit, the same allegations are true that, as Lord Frost's resignation so clearly reveals, the Brexit agenda was a pack of lies. It's not going to be delivered. There's not going to be a bonfire of regulations. We have a border in Northern Ireland. We have a replication of the European deals in our trade negotiations across the world. And that is not Brexit. So what happens if, what happens if Boris goes? Does Brexit go? Does it throw the whole thing up in the air? Will the majority now of people who believe Brexit was wrong have another chance to express their view?
Aha! Another chance to express their view. This is chaos theory on a spectacular scale. Man takes second slice of Victoria sponge and nullifies the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union. Lord Heseltine knows whereof he speaks. They are hunting for bigger game than merely the corpulent debauchee in the Downing Street flat. So we now have a criminal investigation by the Metropolitan Police. Is it a genuine criminal investigation? The last time they were sniffing around big-time parliamentarians, it was a total con job. As you may recall, Paul Gambaccini was on with me a few weeks ago, reminding us that the Met are the guys who, on the word of an obvious fantasist, destroyed the last years of Field Marshal Lord Bramall's life by faking up probable cause to investigate him for drinking the blood of 7-year-old boys at the Carlton Club every other Tuesday. Cressida Dick's Metropolitan Police wound up paying significant compensation to Lord Bramall, to Mr Gambaccini and to many others. Paul and I agreed that Dame Cressida should not have been reappointed, but here she is personally announcing she now has the PM in the crosshairs of the Met. What do you reckon to all of this, including this latest surprise development? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Former Metropolitan Police Chief Superintendent Parm Sandhu joins me. Parm, what do you make of this investigation?
It does appear to have been started very, very late. And as you say, after a huge amount of drip of information. But there does appear to be some sort of liaison with the Cabinet Office and the Metropolitan Police, which is why this has now finally been instigated.
Well, can I ask you this? The Commissioner released this news at an appearance before the London Assembly. When an investigation is formally launched, how often is it that the Commissioner herself announces it?
Very, very rarely. I don't actually remember the Commissioner ever announcing an inquiry or investigation before. So this is very unusual. And even the way that it was announced, it was on, press, media, everybody was there. And it was like a big press conference almost. And it wasn't about answering to the public. It wasn't about what the public wanted. This has become a press and media circus, really. So you correctly make the point there that in fact someone seems to have alerted the media that this news would be revealed on this occasion. So again, it seems to be a coordinated thing. Can I just ask you on the law itself here? As I think was mentioned toward the end of Nigel's show just now, I think I'm reading here from section 127 of the Magistrates' Courts Act. A magistrate's court shall not try an information or hear a complaint unless the information was laid or the complaint made within 6 months from the time when the offence was committed. And we're talking here about, for example, a birthday party in June 2020. Can you actually take that to a criminal court in London? What normally happens in a summary offence, which is what these are, there is a 6-month time limit. But we don't know, you and I do not know which offences are being investigated. So where the announcements were made this morning, the Met Commissioner did actually say, we are looking at some, not all of the offences. So perhaps that one has been excluded. Perhaps there's something in the last 6 months. We won't know until this investigation starts to unfold and those details have been given. But the other thing that the Commissioner did also say was that she's not going to give a running commentary on what's happening with this investigation, but she will give meaningful updates. And until we get those meaningful updates, we don't really know. And this has become almost like a trial by media, a trial by press. And that's where this needs to stop. And it needs to be a proper investigation so that the people of this country can have trust and confidence, not just in policing, but also in the governance of the land. And that's what this is about now. Well,
can I just press you on the business of the timeliness, though? You're suggesting that Dame Cressida has belief that some crimes have been committed within this 6-month timeline. So in other words,
she's got something up her sleeve from autumn 2021, because otherwise it would be unusual, wouldn't it, to conduct an investigation into something you could not lay charges over?
It is very unusual to go back that length of time. However, on the interview this morning where Cressida Dick laid out what she had, she said that they had been given information by the Cabinet Office, and that her officers, her team, had assessed that information, and as a result, an investigation has been launched. So they've got something, there is something there. What that is, I don't know. And what the time period for that is, I don't know. And until we get more information, we can guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you think that there might actually be something from late 2021 that she can take before a judge. How long you've investigated an awful lot of things. This one would seem to me to be relatively simple. I mean, there are parties and there are multiple witnesses, dozens of witnesses to some of these parties. How long do you think the investigation will take?
It does appear to be quite an easy one to investigate because there is CCTV, there is swipe card access, and there are police officers standing outside the building. So it does appear on the face of it that it should be a nice, easy one to do. But what the police can't do is they can't use the information that Sue Gray has already gathered. When they interview those witnesses, those suspects, they have to interview them under caution. So they have to start from zero. They have to start the investigation right from the beginning. And in doing that, they have to get the evidence together. Then they have to caution people, get them together, listen to what they're saying. Now, this depends on how big the team is, how much resource has Cressida actually put into investigating these allegations. If it's only a small team, it is going to take months. It could take a year. But if there's a big enough team, then this could be dealt with very, very quickly. And then everybody could get on with their day jobs.
But isn't a lot of the evidence already in the hands of the Metropolitan Police, considering that it's policemen who check everybody in and out of Downing Street and presumably keep records of those checks?
Now, in fairness to those police officers who have to stand outside, they wouldn't have been looking in people's suitcases, so they wouldn't have seen the allegations or, the booze going in or out, if that is what happened. They will have checked people in and out, but they won't have known whether they were there for a party or a meeting or a legitimate reason. Now, 10 Downing Street has got huge meeting rooms. It's got numerous rooms. So those police officers may have thought that those individuals were there for legitimate meetings. They won't have the power to say, why are you here? Are you here for a party or are you here to work? So in fairness to those police officers, they don't know what goes on inside, because you can't hear a conversation when you're standing on a doorstep outside 10 Downing Street. Absolutely not. They will not know what has happened inside the address.
Okay, not even if people are showing up at unusual hours. And I take your view on that. It's a lot to ask the fellow standing on the door to keep a check of Pam Sandhu, thank you very much for joining us. And as you say, it depends on whether she gives herself a small team or a large team. But she's the boss, so she's certainly capable of giving herself a large team if she wants to sort this out sooner rather than later. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Coming up, you want a conspiracy theory? That we can do. And a former Finnish government minister goes on trial for quoting scripture. Plus your views. Ask me anything you like for Stump the Steyn. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hey, let's get straight to your tweets and emails. Alan says, I hope the police investigate how the picture taken of Johnson and his wife was taken in the garden. Well, Stuart's got the best answer to that, Alan. Stuart says there is nothing worse than the enemy within. As I said, this is different from all the other Western leaders who've made a mockery of lockdown rules, which are rubbish and should never have been imposed. All the other stuff was taken by a member of the public. The guy happened to come into view. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was having dinner in a fancy French restaurant. Another guy in the restaurant takes a photo, puts it on Instagram. That's it. This is a plot. And that's what makes it interesting. Because the plot looks like taking out a sitting Prime Minister. As Stuart, that's right. There's nothing worse than the enemy within. Karen says this ongoing Partygate is keeping the news from far more serious matters. That's what the media likes to pretend. But you know, Karen, that we could be doing a whole hour on Ukraine, but on the whole, the media is only pretending to be interested in Ukraine, doesn't really care about Ukraine. Much rather, there's no wine bottles in suitcases in Ukraine. There might be vodka bottles in suitcases if Putin moves in, but for the most part, people are just pretending to be. I so regret. Do you know there was a by-election in the Solomon Islands yesterday, and they aren't even covering that because they're so obsessed by Partygate. But that's just one of those things that people like to say. One Twitter user says, Cressida Dick should explain why the police did not break the parties up at the time. The police were literally there. That's true. We're asked to believe that guy, even if the guy standing on the doorstep didn't know he was admitting party-goers, the sound of all the funky music and the conga lines and the carousing and the pop of corks perhaps should have penetrated to him. Kathy on Twitter says, first time watching, but thank the Lord for a news channel saying it as it really is. It's a witch hunt. And I haven't spoken to one person who cares about Partygate. I'm not the biggest Boris fan, but let him get to the important things that concern us all. You know something? We can talk about this in the course of the next few days, but I'm beginning to think the main purpose of the police investigation is that they don't want to take him out and have him replaced by somebody who's better and becomes popular. I think they want to keep him in office as a crippled, wounded, dead piece of roadkill just lying there in the middle of the highway and unable to rouse himself for the length of this police investigation to recover his mojo. That would be the purpose there. Now, keep your emails and tweets coming. We got Stump the Steyn a little bit later. The Holy Bible is the world's all-time best-selling book. Amazingly enough, it's outsold all my books combined. I only make that comparison, not because I compare my words with the Word of God, but because an excerpt from one of my books wound up in court for hate speech. And now the same thing has happened to an excerpt from the Bible. Not so long ago, quoting scripture could win you a prize at Sunday school. Now it lands you in the dock at Helsinki District Court on charges of violating the equality and dignity of homosexuals. The accused, facing jail time if she loses, is a former Finnish Minister of the Interior, so the equivalent of the UK's Home Secretary. And this case will determine whether Christian scripture can be criminalised. Päivi Räsänen is the accused and the former cabinet minister, and we're glad to have you with us. I hope, did I say your first name correctly? I get a feeling I didn't. I used to know a bit about Finnish pronunciations, but was that close enough?
Päivi.
Okay, Päivi. Okay. Well, yes. You seem very jolly, considering you're on trial right at the moment. How do you feel the case is going and is likely to go?
Yes, I have to say that just now I'm quite relieved because the hard day is now back. And yesterday, yes, we had the trial, but it continues. We have the next day of trial on February, and after that, then the court makes the decision. It takes about 1 to 2 months to get the resolution of the court. But indeed, this is a very important issue just now in Finland, because it is a question of freedom of speech and freedom of religion in a country that has so long roots in democracy and basic freedoms.
Yes, and this arose simply because you put out, I think it was a tweet, quoting scripture from the Bible, which, whatever one feels about homosexuality, there's not a lot of support for it in the Bible. And so you were prosecuted because the Bible appears now to conflict with Finnish law.
In fact, it was an issue that was debated in the Finnish Lutheran Church, which is a majority church in Finland. About 70% of people, of population, belong to the church. And 2 years ago, the leadership of the Finnish Lutheran Evangelical Church made the decision to support the Helsinki Pride event. And I have to say that shocked me, because I felt that this is in contradiction with the doctrine of the Bible, of the church, which is the Bible. And I took a photo from my Bible, from Romans chapter 1, where the Apostle Paul teaches about marriage and homosexuality, and then asked my leadership of the church in the Twitter update about this contradiction. And some citizen made a criminal complaint, and then police started to investigate this. And at first I thought that it will not conclude to any charges, but now I'm in the situation that, in fact, the prosecutor general has brought up 3 charges. There is also a pamphlet that I had written almost 20 years ago that was picked up, and there are also some kind of teaching about the Bible that is now under charges and investigation. So we are now in that kind of situation in Finland.
Yes, I've heard similar cases from around the Western world. There was a pastor in Canada who had put up, I think it was a billboard, an advertising billboard with a quotation from Leviticus in it. And there have been cases like that, but yours is different because you're a prominent person in Finland. You're a former government minister. Do you think they're making an example of you so that people will just go quiet about this and that they'll just simply say, well, we know these verses from Romans and Leviticus, but we're just going to put them to one side and we won't quote them anymore?
Yes, I think that you are right, because this is just the biggest danger in this all this process, that it will have a chilling effect on Christians and on Finnish people, because they are afraid of expressing their conviction and beliefs in the Bible. But I want to say that I have never insulted or given any hate speech against minorities. So I have always said also in that pamphlet that all people are created equal. All people have the same dignity. So I think that the message of the Bible, it is not insulting or it is not hate speech. It arouses from the love of God.
That's I mean, it's one thing, as I mentioned, one of my books wound up on trial for hate speech, but it's a little different when a book that is in many ways the underpinning of Christendom throughout Europe and the underpinning of our civilization. Because if this case against you were to be successful, if the prosecution was successful, in the next few years, all kinds of other, this passage in this book offends somebody. This passage in this gospel offends somebody, and you could actually wind up filleting the Bible, and there being less and less of it that you could actually utter in public. And in that sense, it's extremely weird to think that you can have freedom of religion, but not the freedom to quote from the central text of that religion.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not alone in my views. Those views that I have expressed, they are the classical doctrines of Christian churches and the Bible. What Christians have believed about marriage and sexuality for hundreds of years. So there is not anything extremist views. And in fact, when the police investigated my writings, the police said that if my writings are banned, then the Bible should also be banned. So, so I think that it would have quite dangerous consequences if I do not win the case. So, of course, I try to defend myself, and I try to defend the freedom of speech, that no one else should be in the same situation that where I am now.
Let me ask you a final question. People often point this out, that there seem to be double standards. You're being taken to court for quoting the Bible, for quoting Romans, and yet there are many blood-curdling passages in the Quran that, for example, are extremely cruel and hateful about Jews, for example, and yet I can't imagine in any European court that any judge would entertain the proposition of a case against somebody for quoting the Quran. There does seem to be a kind of double standard.
Yes, we have had this kind of discussion also in Finland. Many people have asked the same question. And I would say that the LGBT network, it is quite powerful also in Finland as in Europe, in other countries. And it has taken on its target just Christian beliefs and the Bible, because perhaps it would like to compete with the Christian values. And that's why I think that we are now in that kind of atmosphere where we have to defend the freedom of Christian expression and Christian beliefs. So I want to encourage all Christians to be open about their faith, to tell about Jesus and to tell about the doctrines of Bible. Because if we are silent, the space for these freedoms become all the time more narrower.
Yep, a great narrowing is going on. That's a good way to put it. Thank you very much for joining us. We are going to follow this case and we hope to hear back from you. We will keep an eye on that. Helsinki District Court. Thank you for joining us tonight. And with that, welcome to a new feature here on The Steyn Show. Tomorrow's Conspiracy Theory Today. We start in Danville, Pennsylvania.
It began with new information on the bizarre crash in Montour County that had state and federal agencies searching for escaped monkeys. Those monkeys have since been found, and officials tell us they were euthanized.
These 3 escapees were part of a consignment of 100 monkeys from Mauritius, our Commonwealth cousins, 100 monkeys from Mauritius being taken by truck to a CDC facility. That's the Centers for Disease Control, the same fellows who've been running the COVID operation. The truck crashed and 3 of the Mauritian monkeys escaped.
Guy tells me, he goes, oh, he's hauling cats. I'm like, oh. So I go over to look in the crate and there's this green cloth over it. So I peel it back, I stick my finger in there and go, kitty, kitty. And it pops it up and it's a monkey.
Fallon was contacted Saturday by the CDC and was told to monitor herself for any cold-like symptoms.
Cold-like symptoms. Well, the Montour County Sheriff's Department didn't get much say in this traffic accident. Federal agents instantly appeared on the scene, hunted down the escaped Mauritian monkeys, contact with whom can lead to cold-like symptoms, took away the monkeys and killed them, so the local coroner won't get to examine them either.
A little 3-pound monkey doesn't scare me, but why are they so concerned about it is what concerns me.
Oh, come on, man. There's nothing to see here. The CDC shipping infected Mauritian monkeys around rural Pennsylvania? What could possibly go wrong? Just to tie everything together, do you know who wrote a novel about a CDC epidemiologist and a virus that starts with East African monkeys? Why, what a coincidence. The father of this week's British Prime Minister, Stanley Johnson. There it is. Stanley Johnson and his novel from the 1980s, The Virus. Has Boris managed to arrange the ultimate distraction from his birthday cake woes? There he is. There he is with one of those Mauritian monkeys that have the cold-like symptoms they might give you. And double. It's all connected. The CDC, Mauritian monkeys in the wilds of Pennsylvania. Join us next time for tomorrow's Conspiracy Theory Today. Still to come, Stump the Steyn, ask me anything you want. Tweet me at GBNews. Straight ahead, it's that time again. Europe on the brink of war. Seems like old times. Don't touch that dial.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, in a world-exclusive interview from her Syrian prison camp, ISIS runaway Shamima Begum is challenged on the claim she hopes will convince Britain to take mercy on her. Plus, the world's most controversial woman makes an unbelievable proposal to Boris Johnson. bring me back to the UK so I can help you tackle terrorism. And as she complains she's sick of no one believing her de-radicalisation, the man who tracked her down, top journalist Andrew Jury, joins me in the studio to ask, why should we ever let Begum back into the UK, given her despicable actions? That's coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
GB News on TV and radio in the famous words of Sir Edward Grey in that last Edwardian summer of 1914. The lamps are going out all over Europe, but this time it's because Vladimir Putin controls the electricity supply. Even by the bonkers standards of a nutso news media, this Ukrainian thing has come out of nowhere. If you're Ukrainian, Ukraine is all about Ukraine, your life, your country, your future, and lots of luck to you. But if you're from anywhere other than Ukraine, Ukraine is about something else. American decline, Western decline, and the opportunities it offers for predators who keep an eye on the prize. You can read Ben Sixsmith in The Spectator and other places, and he joins us now. Ben, the view we heard earlier is that Boris Johnson's Partygate is a big distraction from important things like Ukraine, but you could just as easily argue that Ukraine is a distraction from fun, trivial rubbish like Boris Johnson's Partygate. It's come out of nowhere. There's 100,000 troops on the borders of Ukraine sent there by Vladimir Putin. Joe Biden is consulting with his allies. The head of the German Navy has had to resign. What's going on under all this?
It would be very interesting to know if the people who are saying we should be paying more attention to Ukraine have been paying more attention to Ukraine. I think what's going on here is definitely Russian chauvinism, a sense of ownership over Ukraine, but it's also the result of the West eternally kicking the can down the road, encouraging the Ukrainian belief that they can join NATO and they will be defended if there's Russian aggression, when manifestly committing ourselves to a war against Russia on behalf of Ukraine would be insane. So, tragically for Ukrainians, the West has been stupid enough to commit itself to insanity.
Yeah, and the way it's presented in the Western media is very childish, or at any rate oversimplified. I mean, in a certain sense, I wouldn't want to overextend the analogy, but Ukraine to Russia is a bit like Ireland to England. It's not a clean either-or question. There are large parts of Ukraine where people speak Russian and think of themselves as Russian. So it's in a sense it's too subtle and nuanced a place for the simplicities of a media narrative.
We certainly can't impose any kind of clear binary on the situation. As you say, elements of eastern Ukraine are far more Russian, elements of western Ukraine are far more Western. And I think that those parts of western Ukraine have been westernizing, that there is more support for joining NATO, support for joining the EU, has encouraged this level of concern, even paranoia on the part of Vladimir Putin. So you're right, it's not as simple as saying it's just Russian aggression. It's not as simple as saying there's no element of Russian aggression. So we have to try and find the middle ground between the two that can avert any kind of major conflict.
When Joe Biden made his remark about minor incursions, quote unquote, which his colleagues in the US administration had to walk back over the next 24, 48 hours, he did seem to be sending a signal that there wasn't going to be any serious response by, he's ruled out any American troops directly in Ukraine. The Germans have ruled out any meaningful financial or economic sanctions. So we're in this weird situation where the West is saber-rattling without having to take in the trouble to go and pick up their actual sabers.
Absolutely. I think in its doddery way, Joe Biden was being unfortunately honest from the perspective of his colleagues, which is that an intervention in Donbass is plainly not as serious as an attack on Kiev, which in turn is not as serious as an attack on Estonia. So perhaps they think that if they talk enough about imaginary consequences to Putin acting, Putin will be foolish enough to believe them. I personally don't think he is that foolish. He might be a bad person, but he's definitely a clever person. And you don't remain leader of a superpower for that long without being so.
No, that's an interesting point. You know, back when the Warsaw Pact collapsed, during that 40-year period, we used to refer to it as Eastern Europe, even though if you look at a map, it's actually Central Europe. Places like Hungary and Czechoslovakia are actually pretty central, right in the middle of Europe. And he had some success, the Soviets had some success in moving the East pretty far west, all the way to East Germany. In a sense, he's managed to do the same thing rather more subtly a generation later. You have something like the Czech Republic that gets 2/3 of its natural gas now from Russia. You have the Germans who basically, as this admiral rather indiscreetly said, treat Putin with respect, think he deserves respect, and for them the source of energy is actually more important than the future of Ukraine.
Absolutely. You can't continue to saber-rattle at the same person that you're simultaneously pleading for support from. So Europe will have to decide whether it wants to keep this cheap flow of gas going, or if it actually wants to pose any kind of stern resistance to Russia in the East. Unfortunately, that might mean making tough decisions like deciding to build more nuclear power stations. So I think generally Western governments would rather keep pretending that nothing is happening until the next poor sap is in power.
Yeah, that would be the logical response to the security situation. You know, I think it was 1943 when the RAF did their dam busters raid on the German industrial hub. I think it was May 1943, because that month they managed to cripple the German war economy by depriving them of, I think it was over 400,000 tons of coal. Well, now you don't need to do that to Germany anymore because they disavowed coal for green reasons and said, oh, we're going to be going towards natural gas. And then it turns out all the natural gas comes from the baddest guy in Europe. Do you think this was actually a major continent security miscalculation by Germany and the principal EU powers to make themselves so dependent on Russia?
It was a tremendous miscalculation, especially as they simultaneously encouraged the Ukrainians to see themselves as a bulwark against Russia. We were really trying to play both sides, and only now do we realize that you can't play that kind of game forever without there being consequences.
That's a good way of putting it. I rather like the way the German Chancellor declined to take a phone call from the American. He didn't want to meet the American president. Didn't want to have a Zoom call with him. He said he was busy, maybe in mid-February, if he wasn't washing his hair or shampooing the cat or whatever. There seems to be a slight wobble in the Western Alliance in that respect. Thank you for joining us, Ben. Very glad to see you. Ben Sixsmith. OK, your chance to stump the Steyn. We may give you your own Nord Stream 3 pipeline if you get something that totally baffles me. One Twitter user says, Mark, this is of great importance, far more than cake. Can you please confirm to the heathen that questioned me on Twitter that pocket squares are not meant to match ties? They should complement them, as yours do. Well, you're making me rather insecure now. I feel like I'm on Miss World being asked whether I put on or what it was, Come Dancing, before it became Strictly. They used to ask whether you'd put on your own sequins. I do put on my own sequins. All I know about this matching, I don't think I've ever come across a matching tie and handkerchief except in an old Monty Python annual that I saw many, many years ago now, where there was a picture of a matching tie and handkerchief, and in fact it was just the supermarket barcode with the little mini barcode next to it. So the big barcode was the tie and the little barcode was the handkerchief. But I generally agree. I think that, in fact, I've never seen, I've been in stores all over the world, and I don't think I've ever seen a matching tie and handkerchief. So I'm with you on that one. Daryl, and now on to the trivial stuff. Daryl on Twitter says, I'm feeling self-conscious now. This is terrible. I'm beginning to use my handkerchief to wipe away the sweat. I'm not used to discussing my wardrobe. Daryl on Twitter says, do you agree it is unlikely that Putin and Russia will invade Ukraine? What does Putin have to gain? Is Putin taking advantage of a weak West because of a weak, frail US president? Well, as we were talking about just now, and this is actually quite important. Nothing exists in isolation. You can't have a fiasco in Afghanistan like the fall of Kabul and then say back at the head office at the Pentagon, oh, well, that's just Afghanistan. The other 199 countries on the planet still fear us as the dominant hyperpower. It doesn't work like that. Putin looks at the fall of Kabul and he thinks, how could I arrange that, but without having to go through the tedium of a 20-year war? Maybe I could just fake it all up instantly, say, oh, I'm going to invade unless you do this, 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 and this, and then let those useless guys at the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon has some of the worst generals of the planet. There's a useful phrase, British phrase, Commonwealth phrase, they don't use it in the United States, parade generals. You look at this guy, General Milley, thoroughly modern Milley, who's the whatever he's called, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's got medals from his shoulder all the way down to his dangly bits. No one knows what they're for. They're participation awards.
And when you lose a war as humiliatingly and as badly as Afghanistan, the rest of the world takes notice and thinks, they're not going to be wanting to go into a battle against the Red Army on our home turf, are they, comrade? No. So what could we do? And that too has a knock-on effect. Let's say there is a minor incursion into Ukraine. Does that increase the likelihood of Chairman Xi saying to his Politburo, oh, you know, I'd like a minor incursion of my own, maybe in Taiwan? All these things are connected, they all have consequences, and they all develop a momentum. And a lot of people have concluded that the American moment is over. David on Twitter says, what is the point of Priti Patel? Oh my God, you've got me there, David. You have stumped the Steyn. I can't give you any. You win the fully loaded Tesla. I'll be around to deliver it within the next 72 hours. Dale says, hi Mark, when is sanity going to be restored and we're allowed to get back to some form of normality? Well, we've postponed normality for another year and a half pending Cressida Dick's investigation. That'll do it for me. You're in the very best of hands for the rest of the evening. Dan Wootton is here to titillate your Tuesday. See you tomorrow.
Hello again. With the notable exception of eastern Scotland, much of the UK has been cloudy. And again, on the cold side on Tuesday, a few cloud breaks, though, will increasingly affect central areas overnight, leading to some frost and fog patches. But for most, it's staying mostly quiet, I think, on Tuesday night, heading into Wednesday. These weather fronts bringing some outbreaks of rain into the north. And those outbreaks of rain mostly on the light side. But behind the fronts, actually a few cloud breaks affecting parts of eastern England, northern and eastern Scotland as well. Staying blustery in the far north with showers moving through the Northern Isles. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it's light winds and it's cloudy overnight.